you really want to make sure that you're on top of diet. You know, it used to be that when you were in your 30s, most women would have at least gotten married, started having babies, and weren't really having discussions around fertility issues in their 30s because they would have had their babies in their 20s. But the world is different. Your body does keep score. Your body is going to take note of how much stress that it's inputting and processing. Hey everyone, welcome back to Prolific Moments with yours truly, Dr. Yenny. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome to the family. This is an amazing platform for women of faith to discuss health-related topics, purpose, and faith-related topics. I'm so excited that you're here again. If you didn't check out our last episodes, we talked about fertility in your 20s, and today we're going to be talking about fertility in your 30s. But before we get into the content of today, if you haven't heard, I'm hosting an event. Yes, our organization called the Prolific Collective is hosting its first event. It is called the Healing Summit on January 25th, 2025. I cannot believe this new year is about to be here, but we are starting off the year strong. We are bringing in some amazing doctors and women of the faith who are going to bridge the gap between health-related topics and the faith. It's going to be a phenomenal day of worship, word. We've got lunch, we've got music, we've got fellowship with women of God. It's going to be an incredible day. And tickets are kind of going already. They're going pretty quickly. If you really want to make sure that you stay on top of the game, take advantage of this early bird pricing that's going to be staying up for just a couple more weeks longer. But secure your tickets, get your girlfriends, get your girl gang, make sure that y'all starting off the year being accountable together. It's going to be an incredible day, and it's going to be hosted in Carrollton, Texas. So if you're in Texas, this is a great day, opportunity for you to drive up to North Texas and spend a full day of empowerment and encounter. I cannot overstate how much this is just a godly movement that is about to happen. So join us on the 25th of January, and let's get into today's topic. So let's talk about how fertility changes in your 30s. If you don't know much about me, I'm a pelvic floor specialist, and I also specialize in reproductive issues. So this is definitely in my wheelhouse. It's something that I see professionally and something that I have a passion about. I feel like a lot of women do not discuss fertility chances they don't discuss fertility outcomes enough. And I think that when you struggle with infertility, especially once you're ready to have a child, the first thing that I see a lot of people struggle with is the fact that I feel like I never knew this. No one ever told me, right? No provider told me, no family member ever told me. And I want us to normalize having these discussions, whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, and in your 40s. And so today we're going to talk about, how to really optimize your fertility and navigate your fertility chances in your 30s. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is understand that once you hit your 30s, especially the age of 35, your fertility chances do decline. And that's really because as you age, your chances of being able to actually have a baby, the amount of eggs that is available left to fertilize takes a steep decline. We don't just kind of have the same amount of eggs available every month to conceive. It actually has this weird exponential chart ratio thing. And so once you hit your 30s, that exponential rate kind of takes a steep decline. Another thing people don't realize is as you age, especially in your mid 30s, your egg quality changes. And so you might have eggs available that are ovulating every month, but unfortunately the quality of those eggs are not the best. And so the chances of those eggs being able to take a fertilization process also decreases. So it's important that you start to discuss your fertility goals early in your 30s. And if you're in your mid 30s, that you understand that, when you do get pregnant in your mid 30s, especially 35 and above, your pregnancy is considered high risk because there are several forms of complications that surround having advanced age pregnancy. And we'll discuss a few of them in a second here. The second thing you want to consider about pregnancy or trying to conceive in your 30s is optimizing your preconception health. So I always say kind of like the things that you don't really have to think about in your 20s, like your diet. I mean, you can get away with having a pretty not so great diet in your 20s and still not have a ton of issues with conception, especially if you don't have like a diagnostic issues. But for your 30s, because you don't have as many eggs available and because the quality is changing so much, you really want to make sure that you're on top of diet. There are two major issues that really impact us when we're in our 30s. It is our thyroid health, as well as our insulin resistance, or the amount of sugar our body is making and processing. Insulin resistance is a problem that a lot of us are starting to discuss in healthcare. I'm sure many of you have heard of a condition called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And essentially PCOS manifests itself in insulin resistance. And so the more simple way of kind of explaining that is whenever you have insulin resistance in your body, it does make it harder for your body to process the hormones that become available for fertility chances. So even with PCOS, you tend to seem like you have a lot of cysts and follicles available. That doesn't necessarily mean that your chances for pregnancy become higher, unfortunately. In fact, with PCOS or insulin resistant condition, you can go months without ovulating, you can have irregular periods. So watching your sugar really helps to improve your chances. Another thing that helps improve your chances is improving your thyroid health. And ironically, managing a good weight, managing your food intake, managing your selenium intake, and the amount of iron you're eating or intaking in your diet will also help to improve your thyroid health. Of course, this does not take the place of seeing a medical professional. So if any of these things kind of strike to you, I do recommend making sure that you book that visit with your OBGYN or your primary care physician to get some updated labs. Number 3, the one that I think is the most common in this category of women in 30s is stress. In fact, there's a ton of research that really links stress and mental health issues to in reducing fertility success. There's some interesting research that came up in the last, I believe, 5 years or so around stress and race. And they find that women, Black women especially, who experience racial stress, experience work stress, even if they have access to fertility support like IVF, getting a donor egg, tend to do worse, tend to have poorer outcomes because of those stress signals in the body. So I cannot overstate how much of importance it is for you to make sure that you're working on your mental health, that you're seeing a mental health provider, that you're staying in prayer, that you are staying in community so that you can experience emotional and mental wellness, because your body does keep score. Your body is going to take note of how much stress that it's inputting and processing. So really pay attention to that, especially when you're in your 30s. All right, another thing that I cannot overstate is fertility preservation. You know, it used to be that when you were in your 30s, most women would have at least gotten married, started having babies, and weren't really having discussions around fertility issues in their 30s because they would have had their babies in their 20s. But the world is different. The honest truth is a lot of us now are career driven, we are purpose driven, and we're taking a little bit of a longer time to start families. And because of that, I have to discuss fertility preservation and egg freezing. In your 30s is the optimal time to consider egg freezing. And I really like to encourage you that, especially if you're in between the ages of 30 and 36, that you try to freeze your eggs as earlier as possible. Freezing eggs is like a cheat code. It is an opportunity to freeze time. So remember how I told you that once you're over the age of 35, like your egg quality takes a steep decline? Imagine if you could freeze your eggs at 31, 32, and you decide to use those eggs when you're in your late 30s or your early 40s. You essentially are using your body's 31-year-old eggs. And I think that's such an important thing to state. Even though egg freezing is not foolproof, right? Not all eggs survive, but the idea of egg freezing is that when you're going through the egg preservation or the freezing cycle, you're going to get a good amount of eggs. And so even those eggs years from now that you decide to use, if they thaw out, if they don't survive, you're still going to have a good amount left over to survive. And just to give us some numbers, some people can freeze as much as 20 eggs. And once they go through that thawing process and that survival process and that fertilization process, they could still have, upwards to 8 or 9 eggs available. So I cannot recommend doing egg preservation, especially if you're not in a relationship and, you're not walking towards marriage right now, you're super career driven. Save yourself the stress while you're in your 30s and freeze those eggs. And lastly, I want to recommend that, when you're in your 30s, do not delay seeking help. I meet a lot of women who want to do everything they can on their own, right? They are likely, gaining spiritual guidance. They are, doing all the holistic remedies on their own to try to conceive. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I do believe that especially as women of faith, we do need to seek God. We do need to pray. Do we need to trust Him as we are trusting God for conception in our 30s? But there is something really valuable to also being someone who has knowledge. Knowledge really improves your ability to access support and to even pray, because when you know what's wrong, you know what to pray about. So I do not think it's responsible for us to pray amiss and pray without true understanding of some of the limitations that we have. So seek help early. Make sure that you have your labs updated. Make sure that you know why you're not conceiving. There is about, I think the research that I saw recently is about 22% of the population falls into that unexplained fertility category, whereas the rest of fertility chances or issues are within male or female specific fertility problems. And even if you are in the unexplained fertility, wheelhouse, at least you know that there is probably not a medical diagnosis, and you can feel more fueled in your prayer and in your pursuit for God to perform a miracle. But no matter what, no matter whether you have an explanation or not, I think it's important that you seek help early and you seek actionable steps early while you're praying, because faith without works is dead, y'all. That is what the scripture tells us. So you have to align that faith with the works and gain that knowledge so that you can take that knowledge to God and pray and believe for a change. So if this video was interesting to you and you learned a lot, I do want you to share the wealth. Make sure that you tell a friend and tell another friend and share on social media or wherever you share content. Even text a friend who might need this, who is in their 30s and isn't really sure where to start on their fertility journey. This can be really valuable and knowledgeable way for folks to be able to access truth. And so I don't want to limit it. So make sure that you subscribe to this channel, share this content, and make sure that you check us out in our next video. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode of Prolific Moments.